Am I not loud enough? Right, good morning all. Welcome to the December Corporate Services Committee meeting. Let's start off. Do we have apologies?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Burns, Watts and Campbell.
Someone like to move that they be accepted?
Moved.
Seconded. Can't say all in favour because that's both of us. Right, who am I handing over to? Oh, the minutes, sorry. They've already been up to council, haven't they? Yeah. Would someone like to move that? That's a true and accurate reflection. Seconded. Any declarations of interest? There being none.
Nil received, Mr. Chair.
We'll go straight into business items. So the Finance Committee report. I'll hand over to you, Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. With this meeting, this is the meeting that's the smaller meeting. We don't provide the large finance report. Those are now being conducted on a quarterly basis. So in the January meeting, the December quarter will be raised and service reports will be gone through. So this is more or less an abridge of the finance up until the end of November. So it's year to date to the end of November, and it's just to more or less highlight to the committee how council is tracking on a financial basis, actuals to budget to the end of November, plus also looking at votes that are required to come through into the mix that we need to approve to continue with works that we've got underway. So I'll just working down through the summary in regards to the financial report. So I'll just run through a quick overview of where we sit at to the end of November. So at the moment, we've got a positive variance to budget of $3.4 million compared to a negative budget variance of $57,000 that was back in September quarter, given that we didn't have a meeting for the October month end. The variations have substantially increased, mainly due to the actual capital works program. So we've got a number of projects that are either just with the timing of some of our budget expenditure and where the projects are actually sitting at this point in time. So I'll just take you through an overview of the different categories within the financial summary. So overall, with our revenue streams, we're nearly hit spot on with our budget overall, but there's about 4 areas there that have got major or significant variations, which we'll just quickly go through. So the government place hostel, their revenue is higher by $169,000. And that's mainly through increased levels of government subsidies, which at the end of the 2020 financial year, we engaged a consultant to look at our government subsidies through our ACFI. And that's more or less dependent on our residents. And that increased our government funding subsidies coming through. So that is a bonus coming into play. However, there is offsetting costs against achieving that additional subsidy revenue, which we'll talk about in the operating expenditure. Sale yards revenue is lower than budget by $135,000. Still, we've still got the drag or the lag of the drought and the throughput coming through the facility. So obviously with a lot of farmers restocking, our levels have been lower than we anticipated to date. So we'll need to review that at the end of the December quarter. Waste revenue was higher than budget by $230,000, which is a good result. We've had higher than expected revenue from disposal fees at the Scone and Aberdeen facility. So it's improved from where it sat last year. So that's a good result coming through. Again, we'll have a good review of that and possibly make some votes coming through in December. And water use revenue, it's lower than budget by $253,000. So obviously our community engagement in regards to conserving water has worked in one respect, but it's reduced our level of revenue coming through. But moving into summer, obviously that will increase. Next items down there is the non-operating revenue and expenditure, and effectively it's a little bit behind budget by 110,000. It's about 1% off budget, and it's mainly just with the internal fleet hire, which is relatively consistent to budget, which is about 70,000, and our quarry revenue is lower by about 50,000. So there's not a huge variation there coming to the end of November. Operating expenditure, similar to the revenue side of things, is nearly spot on budget. It's about 1% above budget at this point in time. And there's two main areas where that budget is in excess of where we thought it would be. One is the government place, as I discussed with the revenue side of things. Our costs are actually increased by 140,000. So it's about a 50 grand differential between the two. So with additional subsidies and services and given to the residents to achieve the extra revenue, we've had to have additional costs for the facility as well. Plus also we've still having engaged the consultants over there with our compliance issues. So we're still addressing those compliance issues to make sure the facility becomes compliant in the department's eyes going forward. And the second item there in the operating revenue is mainly in regards to the local roads maintenance. It's higher than budget by about $200,000 year to date. So obviously we'll continue to monitor that coming through and try to achieve the bang for buck that we've got going through there. So the infrastructure services department is looking at those costs and seeing where the actual the funds are being spent and what roads and so forth. So we'll continue to monitor that as it comes through. So the major movements, as highlighted in the initial summary area there, is the capital works expenditure. It's actually behind budget by about $3.8 million in total, which is about 36%, which a lot of our projects are lagging at the moment, but also we have a bit of a timing issue with a couple of our major projects with the expenditure, given the short turnaround with the November meeting with a cut-off period that was only a couple of days into the new year. There's a couple of costs that didn't get into the mix. Just running down through the major projects that are a little bit behind today. The sporting grounds capital works, all those projects are mainly due to the Stronger Country Community Fund programs and our Bill Rose Complex cricket nets and playground. Now, all of those projects are very near completion. So by the end of December, you would say that those projects are completed. We've had a couple of openings already in December. So that will just be a timing thing coming through. Airport developments, it's a little bit lower than cost by about 600,000. The project is continuing with contractors on site and major costs are expected over the next 2 to 3 months. We did get a late bill come in for about $2.7 million about the end of the first week of December. So that will come in and be highlighted into the capital expenditure budget for December. Yep, very good.
The existing runway was not compliant with, I think, by about half a metre, so we had to widen the existing runway.
Just on you through that, Mr. Chair, that needs to be scoped out and made very aware to the public. It's already on media that that's an additional. It was additional because of
correct
some fairly poor workmanship prior to.
Yep, we'll take that on note to make sure that comes through in the minutes. The other capital works areas there, the reseal programs for the regional and local roads is lower than budget by about 1.13 million. Those programs are currently being finalised at the moment, so that's just mainly a timing with the costs coming through. So it'll be on track. So as you can see, there's a couple of large chunky numbers in the capital works area that will resolve itself by the end of the December quarter. Heavy patching program. We haven't spent anything on our heavy patching program as per the budget at the moment. However, we're going through and reviewing our maintenance because I think the guys have allocated a lot of those heavy patching works, which are required before the reseal program, into a maintenance area. So that may help our maintenance side of the operations. So that'll be a project coming through to the end of December. Main Road 362. It's effectively at the Bunnan Road between the Scone and Merriwar. So that project's now starting to gather a bit of momentum. We're going into finalising the design works, and the works are to commence December, January. So it's starting to get a bit of traction coming through for stages 1 and 2 of that project. There is 3 stages, but we're engaged to go in and do 2 of those stages relatively quickly. Talong Road rehabilitation works is just lower than budget. It's just got more or less a delay with the works being undertaken. So it's been rescheduled to happen in 2021, early 2021. And the Murrundi and Scone to Murrundi pipeline and reservoir works is a bit lower than budget by 350,000. And those works are continuing and they're just about to begin major construction of the reservoir up there. There's a lot of footing being done at the moment. So you will see a lot of those costs start to be chewed into that behind budget area. So overall, that gave us an end result of the $3.4 million. Moving just into the budget position, the next thing there after looking at those higher level numbers, overall our net variations have come back to 0 for the month. So we're still sitting at a budgetary position of nearly spot on. So we've got a balanced budget at this point in time. So we have a schedule that's attached in the attachments, which will highlight those variations that we're proposing coming through. The bank funds and investment report. So at the end of November, we've got $41.7 million sitting in the bank and in our investments. Overall, to the end of October, given that we didn't have an October month-end meeting, the balances at the end of October was 4.3 million, and the balance to the end of November is 40 million for our investments that we're holding. So we've got a fair bit of cash sitting in our investments at the moment, but those will be ultimately used for a lot of our capital works projects coming through. So it's something that we would continue to monitor. The last subheading there is money in regards to our capital expenditure report. So our capital expenditure report just highlighted there where we're sitting at this point in time. It's a little concerning, to be honest, given that we've only spent $6.6 million to the end of November. Even if you add on the airport and the reseals, it only brings us up to probably $11 million in capital expenditure with a revised program of $70 million. So if you can do the maths on that, it's going to be very difficult to achieve that. So what the process is from here, we need to sit down and really look through our capital expenditure budget and look at what is realistic early on in the piece. So for the December quarter report, we'll be putting in there a report about the projects that will be delayed over a period of time, either with design works that construction will start in the 2022 year, but also just give some commentary around why these projects have been delayed, just so the committee's comfortable with that.
How much of that budget is on a time limit?
We have we've got a lot of our grant funding that goes out into the 2022 year. Right. So that time limit, we've got a lot of projects like the airport project that will finalise with its grant funding in the second half of the 2021 year, which is the 2022 financial year. So we're not at risk of missing any of our grant funding milestones at this point in time. And if those are identified, we actually go to the funding bodies and say, can we have a variation of time, which we've done on numerous occasions with our capital works programs coming through for the last 12 to 18 months, especially with a lot of the funding that we've received, which has created a real amount of work for our guys to complete in probably unrealistic timeframes that the government hasn't really taken into account.
I think we need to look at the whole capital works program and get an assessment on the estimated completion date of all the significant projects. And I'd like that report to come to the next committee.
And moving on from that, also through the chair, I think that we'll probably put on there also the grant funding side of things and the actual expiry dates of those grant funding, I think, just so that the committee is aware of that.
That would be handy.
Yeah.
So when is that meeting?
That would
be in January.
Yeah, that'll be the 15th of January, yeah. I believe.
This is the last committee for the year before the ordinary council meeting, so it'll be the second week of January.
Yeah. So the council meeting is the 25th, and it's 10 days before the council meeting, which should be the 15th.
Yeah. So the new GM will have a copy of that on the desk when he gets here.
Correct. Yeah. Moving then into the attachment side of things, and more or less it's a lot of the summary pages that we more or less provide with the major service reports for the end of each quarter, being the fund and function statements, and that more or less is just to give the committee and I an understanding of how each of the service areas are tracking, coming through with year-to-date variations coming in. And also the request votes that we're proposing for the month end. So as you can see there, the variations are as highlighted. The major variations have been highlighted in that initial summary page area.
Yeah, if you look at general fund, pretty much everything's hovering around 100% except for the capital works. So all the other categories of revenue and expenditure seem to be tracking okay.
Yep. The next page after that fund and function is more or less the budget variation requests coming through. So here is just to give you a summarised list of funds that are required to be voted in, and the sources of those fundings coming through. So overall, the net variations on the operating result is zero, with a number of those items coming out of restricted assets, out of our reserves for different things. One area there where a major variation that we have got going through is the UV and chlorination plant, which is a significant portion of that variations. So we're backing out about $1.5 million for that project. The concept design works won't be completed until at least the end of the June 2021, with the actual construction works on that to commence in the 21-22 year. So there's just been some delays with discussions with the Department of Water. And then the only other major variations in there really is we're just moving a bit of money between the new reservoir and the Scone pipeline budgets. So there's about $500,000 being transferred between those two projects, and that's only just to reallocate budget funds that were included in the pipeline for the reservoir works to be completed. Moving in then to in the attachments just to our financial report, it's more or less just an indication of how our funds have tracked over the last 12 months. Just on a graph point of view, this is on page 12. So it's more or less just indicating where we sit. And obviously, as you can see there in the May, June areas where we had that big spike when we borrowed down the $10 million, which is sitting in kitty awaiting use for construction works. The next two pages after that, in 13 and 14, is more or less our investments held. So obviously a requirement for council is to advise where our investments are held and with what funding bodies that we've put those with. So this is just to give you an indication of where those funds are sitting. So as you can see, in the end of October, we had 40.3 million, and at the end of November, we had $40 million sitting in investments within the required area. And the final attachment that we've got in there is our capital works program. So it's just more or less to give the committee a summarised version of all our capital works program and how it's tracking year to date. Obviously, with our major, it more or less just gives you an overall snapshot, because this is the major expenditure side of council, and it just highlights in here the areas where we're lagging behind with some of our projects, which mainly have been highlighted in that initial summary that we've got coming through. So that's just for your own benefits to work down through. I suppose the only other thing there is when, as I mentioned before, just with the amount of expenditure that has happened to date on page 27, as you can see there, with the $70.7 million revised budget for our capital works, and we've only spent 6.6 million year to date, given that you can add 4 million onto that for the airport and the reseals. 10.6 out of 70 million after 5 months of the year, which is over 40% of the year. We're going to struggle to deliver that $70 million already.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the sale yards there, Wayne, 135 grand, that's well and truly over. But the committee is well and truly aware of that as well. We had a sale yards meeting only last week, and the committee is certainly looking into where savings can be done there with casual wages, etc. But to what's been going on, that's not too bad actually for the numbers, etc. And we just got to work very hard to try and bring that in. I think that the future up there is still looking pretty positive, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. Through the chair, I agree. The business model for the sale yards will turn around as a cyclic business, which will turn around with seasons as they come through.
Yeah, we're averaging between 300 and 500 every week, which is below I think the budget of between 700 and 800. That's what we set the budget at. But it is what it is, and hopefully it'll turn around as conditions improve.
Would you like me to move that, Mr. Chair? Moved.
Right, Alan, your turn.
Anything in particular councillors would like?
Just talk through.
This information, or this report's based on information we get from Public Works through our project management framework. And that format you see there with the topic current, previous period being 1 month. Whether it's good, bad or indifferent, green's good, orange, amber is not so good, and red's not good. This gives you a bit of an indication very quickly of how things are tracking, have been tracking and are tracking now. In terms of the schedule, the air site's going pretty well. We're still looking to finish in March. We met our deadline to open the runway on last Saturday. There's a few issues that councils are aware of. Some of the pilots are not happy with the roughness of the strip and some loose stone. We had sweepers sweeping yesterday, but that caused another issue. It ripped out a few little patches of seal on the edges. So that's getting fixed up. And we're trying to address some of those rough spots. So we're talking to Darragh about that.
So when you talk about the rough spots, is that those areas that we were examining?
Yes, so we looked at the other day. There's 1 or 2 other spots too that we didn't notice, which have come to light, mainly picked up by the ARO, Airport Reporting Officer and Work Safety Officer, who spend a lot of time out there looking and watching things. So we're looking at those, and I've been also asked to look at getting a proposal priced up for an AC option, asphalt concrete option over that. So that's happening. Trying to get a bit of feedback on when we're likely to get that back. It might take a little while, especially this time of year.
So those areas, Darragh the contractor is looking at them and there's going to be
we're looking at them, but some of them are in the heavy patch areas and some aren't. Some are right on the edge, and they had to meet the edge, so there's an argument that could have they done better, or not, because they had to meet what was there already. So there's some discussion going on. It's probably the best way to describe it.
So through you, Mr. Chair, Al, so those spots we picked out during the week, Darragh's responsibility?
One being right on the edge is a questionable one, but a number are theirs.
Okay, and the sweeping, you said there was a few issues out on the edge. Will that actually...
Not on the runway, just on some taxiways.
Yeah, so will that all harden as time comes? Will that just get better as time goes on?
It will. And it's a function of being so new.
Okay, and the question was asked today in infrastructure by a councillor. How often is the runway going to have to be swept? And of course I said when required. Is that pretty right?
Yeah, I think so. And it'll become less in time, in my view too.
Yep.
Are councillors happy with the format of this report, or do you, because we can provide more detail, but I'm not certain the level of detail you want.
I'm quite happy with it.
So the contingency budget to date
I haven't got it at my fingertips. To date, we still have contingency available, but there's some, airside, we've got a number of small contingencies. And we're still okay on that area. The building side hasn't started yet, so we haven't signed off on anything, but we've got one big looming one, which is fire management, which is mentioned in there.
Yeah.
And we don't know what that cost is going to be, but we will soon, and we'll need to communicate that to councils because it's likely to be quite expensive.
The reason for that is because the aircraft are fueled. There's different requirements for sprinkling systems under the Building Code of Australia as compared to a static display that with no fuel in the aircraft. So there's different requirements in terms of fire safety.
So just through that, Mr. Chair, shouldn't that have been picked up right from the start?
Well, the original start, the plans developed by STEER, the proposal there was for no sprinklers and had fire systems, but their assessment of the building code was that they didn't need them. These builders' building assessment of the Building Code of Australia is that they do, and we've also they've had fire engineers involved, which are sort of proposing the design and to meet the BCA. And we were rather shocked when they started coming back with all the stuff they needed. So we got an independent fire engineer just to review what they had done. And that fire engineer was the person that did the White Park arena fire sign-off and the Star Yards. And his comments were just for doing a review of the documentation and then speaking to the BCA certifier was that generally is right. There might be a bit of tweaking in the volume of water to be stored and all this sort of thing, but yeah, it's going to need a sprinkler system and a foam system.
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, a little bit disappointing that STEER didn't pick that up from day one. Do some more homework on it because it's yeah. Well, sounds like it's going to be needed.
Public Works contacted the guy that did it, and he was under the impression that the planes weren't going to have fuel on it. So I think that's the underlying issue.
And that was never the case from the inception of the project.
No, well,
the planes are going to be static. So it seems to have been missed in that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a museum; it's an aviation attraction centre.
It was always going to be.
Yeah, so that's nothing changed. I'm very disappointed in that.
Well, do you have a mover?
Moved.
Seconded.
We do have a late report, Mr. Chair. We do have a late report policies.
Yeah. Hand that over to you, Christian, to run us through them.
Mr. Chair, as you know, Council is required to have policies in relation to its investments and borrowings, and we are taking a number of policies directly to the Council meeting next week, but the Finance Manager and I discussed it last night, and it's probably that it come to this committee first, and actually in one of the policies it actually says that the Corporate Services Committee will be consulted. The borrowing policy is fairly similar to the outgoing policy. The outgoing policy did refer to the option of borrowing variable interest rates, but obviously that's quite risky. So as per current practice, we've removed that, and we are limiting ourselves to fixed interest. We're looking at things like, loans commensurate with the life of the asset and all those sorts of elements of borrowing policy. and also the fact that it needs to be, borrowings need to be in the operational plan, and if there's any borrowings during the year that are not in the approved budget, then there needs a resolution of council and application to the Office of Local Government. So just a bit of a tidy up in some of those statutory type requirements. In terms of the investment policy, the policy is based on the Office of Local Government model investment policy. So basically it's the information is from that. If you look at part 5 there, that is basically a reflection of the Minister's order, which we've actually attached to the report at the back, which the Minister for Local Government under section 625 of the Local Government Act specifies what council can invest in, and that is defined by the most recent version of the Minister's order, which is actually 9 years old now. So previously councils could invest in A-rated products, but due to CDOs and other things that some councils were involved in, that's been removed from the current order. So look, it's quite a conservative policy. We're quite limited as to what we can invest in. If you look at the categories on page 3, we mainly are looking at, you know, bank-based term deposits. So yeah. There's not a lot of we can invest in. So. All right. And so you'll notice this policy is in the new format that we've adopted as a template for our policy.
And just further on from the Director's comments, there was one area in the investment policy that we had to insert, and that mainly came around a debt covenant that T-Corp, Treasury Corporation, put on us for borrowing funds at lower rates of interest. And it's mainly around the level of the credit rating of the institutions which we invest with. So they're very keen to see us put in nothing other than at the very lowest BBB rated investments. So again, that adds more security around capital guarantees and so forth.
Very good. Do I have a mover for the recommendation? Okay, I'll do it myself.
Second.
Financial statements, or is that?
It's just for you to take away.
Okay. A little like reading for the weekend. Oh, no, no.
Mr. Chair, I've got one quick question
Yeah, sure.
to do with more the land committee. The building adjacent to the Shire office, where are we up to with that in Liverpool Street?
We're moving towards demolition of that building. It is unsafe and unfit for purpose. So I think we've budgeted an amount for that.
Correct. Yes. No, we've got an amount of $160,000 in the budget to do demolition works, and then also to look at what options we've got available for that site. Obviously, the demolition works won't be $160,000, but it was mainly proposed around possible car space areas and so forth like that.
Have we got a rough time frame on demolishing?
I'd say by first quarter of next calendar year, by the end of March.
Probably have to take that on notice and get clarity around when that would happen, but we'd hope that it would be in that first quarter coming through.
Yeah, there's no reason why that shouldn't happen as soon as possible.
Are we going to bring a report to council on possible uses for that site? I'm just thinking in light of the quite heated comments that
Definitely.
the views that were exchanged at the last meeting.
Yeah.
I think a couple of my colleagues would have strong ideas about possible uses for that block.
No, definitely that would go back up to council. The first stage will be the demolition of the site and to clean up that site. And then from there, obviously because it's inhabitable and it's got a demolition order on it. There is items within that facility though that we're looking at maybe transferring to the possible emergency housing down at 7 Sermon Street. So there's like the kitchens and the bathroom areas and things like that. So we're going to try and salvage as much stuff out of the actual infrastructure works out of the facility over there before demolition, so that we can reuse those things in the actual emergency housing that's proposed down at 7 Sermon Street, which requires a little bit of upgrading to make it habitable for the proposed tenants.
Yeah, I think it's been previously discussed at council that the proximity of that block to the police station and also this building makes it suitable for some of that protective housing for DV victims, etc., etc. So anyway,
yeah, it's basically
it's a
blank canvas. It's so many. I think it's 1,100 square meters or something like that. So there's lots of things that you can do there. For me, I think it would be a shame to turn it into a car park. I don't think that would be the best, but that's just my personal view. I think we can do a lot better than that.
good.
So just to move on for that, is that house is certainly not worthy of transporting by someone? It's too far gone.
I'd have to probably take it on notice because I haven't physically been in the facility. I've only been advised that it's not worth resurrecting per se, and it's non-inhabitable. So I'd take that on notice and find out exactly what the condition of the facility is,
yep,
and whether or not there is what is salvageable out of the facility, yep, before we actually hit the button to demolish.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is if there's someone out there prepared to take it away in a truck, and everything going to be better than saying it, putting a pile somewhere. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it is stumped. It's not built on a slab, so technically you could crane it out. I mean, somebody might want to, put it on a farm and renovate it as a project. I mean, you never know.
No, you never know. There's been a couple around that street moved on up into Susan Street, I think. So yeah, it'd be worthwhile looking into.
Take it to Maryville. Take it to Maryville.
Some chair of council can. He loves relocating homes. Right, is there anything else? Any other questions? Great, thanks for your time, everybody.
So, councillors, is a copy of the financial statements, which are going to be